He said it without mercy, without romance, like a man already halfway gone. "I am a dying man," he told her. "Give me a child, and I leave you everything I own." Eliza froze where she stood. Her hands were wet with dishwater. Her heart slammed so hard she felt dizzy. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not kindly, not cruelly, just final. She stared at the stranger's face, lined deep by wind and years, and wondered if this moment would ruin her or save her. She did not answer. Not yet. The trading post behind her buzzed with noise. Men laughed. Boots scraped the floor. Coins clinked. Life went on, careless and loud, while her world tilted on one sentence. The man waited. He did not rush her. He looked tired, bone-deep tired, like someone who had already buried himself in his thoughts long ago. Eliza wiped her hands on her apron and forced herself to breathe. She was 23 years old, though most days she felt much older. Her shoulders carried a weight that never lifted. Responsibility, fear, hunger. She had learned early that hope was a dangerous thing. Behind the thin wall, her aunt coughed again. The sound sliced through Eliza's chest, a dry, rattling cough that came too often now. She turned her head slightly, listening. The cough faded, replaced by weak breathing, still alive, still slipping. The man noticed her flinch. "You're caring for someone," he said quietly. "My aunt," Eliza replied. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "She raised me." He nodded once, as if that explained everything. His name was Caleb Rowan. Everyone in Pine Hollow knew it, or knew of it. He was spoken about in low voices, like storms or death. A mountain trapper who vanished for years at a time. A man who survived winters that killed others. A legend who walked back into town looking thin, yellow-eyed, and used up. No one knew why he had come down from the high country so early. No one knew he was dying. Eliza had first seen him 3 days earlier, when he sold his furs. Then his traps. Then his pack animals. Men whispered. Mountain men did not do that unless something was wrong. Trapping was their blood. Their breath. Now he stood in the back room of the trading post, facing her alone, having just offered her the strangest bargain she had ever heard. "I'll be clear," Caleb said. "I have maybe a year, less if winter comes hard. A doctor saw me at Fort Clay, liver's failing." Eliza swallowed. Death had a smell. She knew it well. It lived in sick rooms and sleepless nights. "I built a cabin high in the Bitterstone Range," he continued. "Strong walls, good land, spring water, supplies cached for years, gold, pelts, tools, all of it." He paused, watching her carefully. "I have no heir." Eliza's fingers curled into her apron. "Why me?" "You're young." "Healthy," he said simply, "and you're alone." The truth of it landed like a blow. "My wife died giving birth," he added after a moment. "That was 20 years ago. I never tried again." Silence stretched between them, thick, heavy. Eliza's mind raced. This was not a proposal wrapped in flowers. This was a contract carved from fear. But outside that room waited something worse. The world did not care if she was gentle or hard-working or kind. It only cared if she could stand on her own. And she could not. Not anymore. The trading post owner had warned her last week. He needed workers who could keep up. He had mouths of his own to feed. Eliza did not blame him. The frontier was not cruel. It was practical. Caleb spoke again. "I'll pay for your aunt's care. Doctor. Medicine. A warm room she won't want for anything." Eliza's breath hitched. That was the blade, clean and sharp. "And in return," she whispered, though she already knew. "You come with me," he said. "You live as my wife. You give me a child. When I die, everything passes to you, to the child." He looked away then, as if ashamed of needing this at all. "This is not love," he said. I won't pretend it is, but I won't mistreat you. And I won't leave you helpless." Eliza stood very still. Her legs felt hollow. She thought of cold nights, empty cupboards, her aunt's labored breathing. She thought of the way men in town looked at her, measuring what she could give, what she was worth. She left the room without answering. That night, she sat beside her aunt's bed until dawn. Each breath sounded thinner than the last. Eliza held her hand and watched the oil lamp flicker, thinking of mountains she had never seen and a man who spoke like death had already claimed him. In the early light, her aunt stirred. "What troubles you, child?" Eliza told her everything. When she finished, the old woman closed her eyes. "Take it," she whispered. "But he doesn't love me," Eliza said, tears slipping free. "Love is a luxury," her aunt replied. "Safety is not." By evening, Eliza found Caleb outside the trading post, sitting alone, staring toward the distant peaks. "I accept," she said, her voice shaking, "but I have conditions." He stood slowly, giving her his full attention. "Name them." As the sun sank low, Eliza felt the last door behind her closing, and the first one opening ahead. Caleb listened without interrupting. That alone surprised her. "My aunt stays cared for," Eliza said. "Proper medicine, a doctor who checks on her, warm food, clean bedding." "You have my word," he said at once. "And the child," she continued, her voice unsteady. "If I give you one, that child will be raised with kindness, not just taught to survive. You must promise that." His eyes softened, just slightly. "I would never want it otherwise." She drew a breath. "And I need to know where we'll live." Caleb nodded. "The cabin sits above the tree line, but not exposed. Thick logs, stone hearth, spring water year-round. Winters are hard, but it's safe." She searched his face for lies, found none. That was enough. They married the next morning. No flowers, no music, just a Bible on the trading post table and two men standing witness. Eliza's hands shook as she spoke her vows. Caleb stood straight, despite the sickness pulling at him from the inside. Her aunt sat wrapped in blankets nearby, eyes bright with tears. Afterward, Caleb paid the doctor in gold coins. Real ones. Eliza watched as her aunt was moved into a warm room in the owner's home. Medicine replaced guesswork. For the first time in months, her breathing eased. 3 days later, Eliza packed everything she owned into a single cloth bundle. She did not cry when she left Pine Hollow. There was nothing left there that belonged to her now. They traveled with 2 horses and a mule. The land rose steadily. Trees thickened. The air thinned. Eliza's legs ached by the first afternoon. But she did not complain. She would not begin this life by proving herself weak. Caleb moved slower than she expected. Careful, measured. He noticed when she stumbled and adjusted the pace without comment. That night, he showed her how to build a fire with damp wood, how to keep smoke low, how to roll her blanket so the cold ground would not steal her warmth. She watched closely. Every lesson felt urgent. By the 3rd day, snow lingered in the shadows. Eliza grew dizzy from the climb. Caleb offered his hand when the trail narrowed. She took it. His grip was steady, reassuring. "You're doing well," he said quietly. "Most folks from town don't." The cabin appeared on the 7th day. It stood firm against the wind, tucked between tall pines like it belonged there. Smoke stains darkened the stones around the chimney. A stream cut through the valley below, clear and singing. "This is home," Caleb said. The word settled strangely in her chest. Inside, the cabin was warm, solid, built by hands that knew storms. Caleb wasted no time teaching her the rhythms of the place. How to store food, where the traps lay, which paths were safe when snow came early. "You'll need all of this," he said one evening, "for yourself, for what's coming." She understood. Weeks passed. Eliza learned to gather herbs, to smoke meat, to read the sky. Her hands blistered, then toughened. The silence stopped frightening her. It began to feel honest. Caleb grew weaker. Slowly, quietly. He never complained. In the evenings they sat by the fire. He told stories of winters that nearly killed him, of rivers he crossed on faith alone. She listened, seeing not a legend, but a man shaped by survival. One night, by the firelight, she asked about his first wife. She was Shoshone, he said. Brave. Stronger than me. She saved my life once. Quote, he did not speak of her death in detail. He did not need to. When Eliza realized she was with child, she waited 2 weeks before telling him. They were sitting on the porch, watching the peaks fade into shadow. I think I carry your child, she said softly. Caleb turned slowly. For a moment, he could not speak. Then he took her hands as if they might vanish. Thank you, he whispered. Winter came early. Snow pressed against the cabin walls. The wind howled without mercy. Caleb's strength faded faster now. Some nights, Eliza heard him groan in pain when he thought she slept. She stayed close. In late October, he collapsed outside. She dragged him in, heart pounding. He cupped her face with shaking hands. These months, he whispered, you gave me peace. She could not stop the words when they came. I love you. His eyes filled. I love you too. Labor began during a storm. Eliza worked through the pain alone. The fire burned low. Caleb drifted in and out of consciousness beside her. At dawn, a cry filled the cabin. A boy. Strong. Alive. Eliza wrapped him tight and placed him in Caleb's arms. Tears slid down the mountain man's face as he whispered the name he had chosen. The sun rose fully. Caleb Rowan took his last breath holding his son. Eliza did not scream. She held him through the silence. Spring came. She buried him beneath the wide sky. And she stayed. The first winter alone nearly broke her. Eliza learned quickly that grief did not arrive loud. It came quietly, in the way the cabin felt too large at night, in the way the fire cracked without anyone beside her to comment on it, in the way silence pressed down until she could hardly breathe. She named the boy Samuel. He was strong, loud, hungry. His cries cut through the mountain air like a blade, and more than once Eliza wept with relief just hearing him breathe. Life demanded attention. That saved her. She worked even when her body ached from childbirth. Chopped wood with shaking arms, melted snow for water, set traps with hands that still trembled. Caleb had prepared her for this. Every lesson echoed now, steady and firm, like his voice still guided her movements. Slow hands, she whispered to herself as she skinned a rabbit. Waste nothing. Some nights she spoke to him out loud, told him what Samuel did that day, asked questions she already knew the answers to. The mountains did not judge her. They listened. When spring finally came, it arrived like mercy. Snow retreated from the valley floor. The stream swelled with clear water. The first green pushed through dark earth, stubborn and alive. Eliza carried Samuel outside and let the sun warm his small face. You belong here, she told him. So do I. But belonging did not mean safety. One afternoon, as she checked the trap line with Samuel bound tight to her chest, she heard hoofbeats. Her heart jumped. Strangers rarely climbed this high unless they had reason. She reached for the rifle before she saw them. 3 riders appeared between the trees. Their horses moved easy, confident. Not hunters, not traders. Her breath caught as she recognized the markings on their clothing. They were Crow. Caleb had spoken of them often. How they respected strength. How they honored promises. Still, fear crept in despite herself. She stood her ground. The lead rider dismounted slowly, showing his hands. His hair was braided with feathers, his face calm and open. He studied Eliza for a long moment, then looked at the child. You are the woman of the mountain man, he said in careful English. Eliza nodded. He was my husband. The man placed a hand over his heart. He was our friend. Relief nearly buckled her knees. They stayed only a short while, long enough to bring dried meat and a small bundle wrapped in hide. Before leaving, the man touched the bundle gently. "For the child," he said. "The mountains watch him." After they rode away, Eliza sat on a rock and cried until Samuel stirred against her chest. Summer demanded more of her than winter ever had. She learned to plant, learned which ground held promise and which did not, learned that storms came fast and without warning. She learned to read the birds, the wind, the smell of rain before it fell. Samuel grew quickly. His eyes followed everything. His hands gripped her shirt with surprising strength. At night she rocked him beside the fire, humming softly, telling him stories about a father he would never truly know. "He walked higher than most men dared," she whispered, "and he loved you before he ever saw you." Some evenings exhaustion pressed her so low she wondered if she would fail, if the mountains would finally take back what they had loaned her. Then she would remember Caleb's hands guiding hers, his quiet confidence, his faith that she could do this, and she would stand. By autumn, strangers began to appear, trappers passing through lower valleys, hunters who had heard rumors. A woman alone in a cabin once owned by a legend, men curious, men hopeful. Eliza greeted none of them kindly. She kept the rifle visible, her voice steady. She spoke little. Those who lingered too long felt the weight of the place and left uneasy. One man did not. He arrived near dusk, a tall man with sharp eyes and a smile that never reached them. He claimed he had known Caleb, spoke of shared winters, old hunts. Eliza listened without inviting him inside. "You shouldn't be alone out here," he said eventually. "A woman and a child need protection." "I have protection," she replied, resting her hand on the rifle. His smile thinned. "A dead man can't help you now." The words struck like a slap. That night she did not sleep. She packed what she could carry, moved Samuel to the hidden cache Caleb had shown her long ago, a small shelter carved into rock, invisible unless you knew where to look. She waited. The man came back at dawn. He found the cabin empty. Anger cracked through his calm. He searched, called out, cursed. When he finally left, Eliza did not move until the sun was high. She returned to the cabin shaken but alive. That was the moment she understood fully. This place was hers now, but it would never forgive weakness. Winter returned hard the following year. Samuel took his first steps as snow fell outside the door. He laughed when she clapped. That sound warmed the cabin more than fire ever could. Eliza watched him carefully, watched the way he leaned toward the mountains, curious and unafraid. She felt pride and fear, because she knew the truth. One day, the world beyond these peaks would come calling, and she would have to decide how much of it she would allow into her son's life. Samuel turned 3 the summer the men returned. Eliza sensed it before she saw them. The mountains had a way of warning her now. The birds went quiet. The air felt tight, like a held breath. She stood outside the cabin, one hand shading her eyes, the other resting on Samuel's shoulder. 3 riders moved along the lower ridge. They were not Crow, not traders either. Their horses were lean, pushed hard. Men who traveled with purpose rarely brought good news. Eliza ushered Samuel inside and barred the door. Her movements were calm, practiced. Fear no longer ruled her. Preparation did. She loaded the rifle and waited. The riders stopped short of the cabin, clearly surprised to find it occupied. One dismounted and called out her name. That alone made her spine stiffen. "Eliza Rowan," the man said. "We don't mean harm." Quote. She stepped onto the porch where she could be seen. The rifle stayed in her hands. "Then say what you want and leave," she replied. The man swallowed. "We came about Caleb." Her heart thudded once, hard. "He's been gone near 4 years," she said. "You're late." "We know," the man said carefully. "That's the trouble." They explained in pieces. A claim filed late. A trader from the plains who believed Caleb's land should have passed to the territory, not to a woman. Paperwork. maps drawn by men who had never climbed these slopes. "Eliza," the man said, "there are those who think you don't belong here." She felt heat rise in her chest. "My husband built this place with his hands. He died here. I raised his son here. That may not be enough." She stared at them, the mountains at her back, Samuel's quiet breathing behind her. "It will have to be," she said. The men left uneasy. They did not threaten. They did not promise safety either. That night, Eliza sat by the fire long after Samuel slept. She traced the grain of the table Caleb had built. Thought of the gold caches, the land, the promise he had made. Everything he left her could be taken by men with ink and distance, unless she fought. Autumn came early again. Eliza prepared as if war were coming. She laid in supplies, mapped the trails she could block or hide, taught Samuel to stay silent when she asked, to listen, to trust her voice. He learned quickly. One morning, as frost clung to the grass, Samuel asked, "Mama, why don't we go to town?" Eliza knelt to his level. "Because this is our home." "But there are other children." She hesitated. This was the question she had known would come. "One day," she said, "when you're ready." The men returned before winter. This time there were 5. They came with papers and firm voices. They spoke of law, of claims, of what was proper. Eliza listened without interrupting. Then she went inside and returned with a small leather pouch. She poured gold dust into her palm. "My husband earned this land with blood and bone," she said. "If the law wants it, the law can come take it themselves." The men looked at the gold, then at the rifle, then at the mountains rising around them. "This isn't over," one muttered. "No," Eliza agreed, "it isn't." That night, snow began to fall. Winter settled in heavy and deep. Samuel fell ill with fever. Eliza barely slept, keeping him warm, whispering comfort while fear clawed at her chest. She thought of her aunt, of how helpless she had once felt. She refused to feel that way again. When the fever broke, she cried openly for the first time in years. Spring brought unexpected allies. The crow returned with the thaw. They brought news. They had heard of men asking questions, making claims, pushing into places that were not theirs. "You are not alone," the elder told her. "The mountain remembers its people." That summer, a letter arrived, a formal notice. The territory intended to send an agent before winter to assess the claim. Eliza read it twice. Then she folded it neatly and placed it beside Caleb's old journal. That night, she walked the ridge alone. The wind cut sharp. Stars burned bright overhead. "I don't know how to protect this forever," she said aloud. "But I'll protect him." She looked back toward the cabin where Samuel slept, and she made a decision. If the world insisted on finding them, then she would meet it on her own terms. But that would mean stepping beyond the mountains. For the first time since Caleb's death, Eliza wondered what she might lose by leaving, and what she might lose by staying. Eliza left the mountains at first light. Samuel rode ahead of her on the mule, bundled tight, eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. He was nearly 6 now, tall for his age, quiet when it mattered. He watched the world the way Caleb once had, measuring it before stepping in. They followed the old trail down through pine and stone. Eliza did not look back until the cabin vanished from sight. When it did, her chest tightened. Leaving felt like tearing loose a root that had grown deep, but staying without a fight would have been worse. The town of Red Hollow sat lower than Pine Hollow, broader and louder. Smoke drifted from chimneys. Wagons crowded the road. Men stared when they passed, eyes sliding from Eliza's rifle to the boy at her side. She did not slow. The territorial agent arrived by noon. He was younger than she expected. Clean coat, polished boots, ink-stained fingers. He greeted her politely, which unsettled her more than hostility would have. "You're Mrs. Rowan," he said. "I am," she replied. He gestured toward a table inside the courthouse. "We'll need to review the claim." Eliza sat. Samuel stood close, his small hand gripping her coat. The agent spoke of boundaries and records, of surveys drawn years after Caleb had already built his life, of rules that did not bend easily for widows in high places. When he finished, Eliza reached into her satchel. She placed Caleb's journal on the table. The leather was worn smooth by years of handling. The pages inside held maps drawn by hand, notes about water sources, hunting grounds, cabins built and repaired, names of men who had passed through and never returned. This land wasn't empty, she said. It was lived on, worked, bled into. The agent turned pages slowly. His expression shifted. And this, Eliza added, laying down a folded paper, is the marriage record and the birth record of our son. Samuel straightened without knowing why. The agent cleared his throat. There have been questions. Eliza met his eyes. Ask them. The room felt smaller. The agent finally nodded. I'll need time. They waited 2 days. During that time, men approached her, some curious, some cautious, a few openly bitter. A woman alone with a child and a mountain fortune made people uncomfortable. It always had. On the 3rd morning, the agent returned. The claim stands, he said, provisionally. Relief flooded her so fast she nearly sagged. But, he continued, there will be expectations, taxes, occasional inspections. Eliza nodded. She had known there would be a price. We can manage, she said. The agent hesitated. Most wouldn't choose that life. Eliza looked down at Samuel, then back at the man. Most never had reason enough. They left Red Hollow before sunset. The climb back was slower. Samuel tired easily. Eliza lifted him when needed, ignoring the ache in her arms. Each step upward felt like reclaiming something stolen. On the 4th day, they were met on the ridge by riders. Crow. The elder dismounted and studied her face. You went to speak with the paper men. I did. And? She allowed herself a small smile. They listened. The elder nodded once. Good. The mountain does not like being told it does not belong. They reached the cabin by dusk. Smoke stains. Quiet walls. Familiar ground. Samuel ran inside, laughing, touching everything as if to be sure it was real. That night, Eliza sat by the fire and felt the weight of the past years settle differently, not lighter, but steadier. She had done what Caleb never could. She had faced the world he avoided, not out of fear, but out of choice. Winter came again, but it did not feel cruel this time. Samuel learned to read by firelight, learned to shoot straight, learned when to speak and when to listen. Eliza watched him grow with a mix of pride and worry that never faded. One evening, as snow fell soft outside, Samuel asked, Mama, did Papa know I would be strong? Eliza smiled sadly. He believed it. Samuel nodded, satisfied. Spring brought green back to the valley. Eliza stood on the ridge one morning, looking down at the land that had nearly been taken from her. She thought of the bargain that had started it all, of the dying man who had asked for a child and left her his whole world. He had given her more than land. He had given her the courage to stand alone. As Samuel called to her from below, Eliza turned toward the cabin. There was still danger in these mountains, still choices ahead. But for now, the world could wait. They had work to do. Samuel turned 10 the winter the mountains tested him. It began with a storm that arrived too fast to outrun. The sky darkened before noon. Wind tore through the valley like something alive, snapping branches and driving snow sideways. Eliza felt the change in her bones long before the first white curtain swallowed the trees. Inside, she told Samuel, now. They barely made it. Snow buried the door by nightfall. The cabin groaned under the weight of it. Eliza fed the fire until her arms shook. Samuel stayed close, quiet without being told, his eyes tracking every sound. That night, the fire failed. Not fully, just enough. Eliza woke to cold, a wrong kind of cold. She saw the embers first, then Samuel's pale face. She moved without panic. Panic wasted time. She cleared the flue, rebuilt the fire, wrapped Samuel tighter. whispered steadily while the wind screamed outside. By dawn, the storm passed. Samuel lived. After that, Eliza knew the truth she had avoided. He would not always be a boy at her side. The mountains had shaped him the way they shaped all who stayed long enough. Strong, observant, restless. He asked questions now. About towns, about people, about the world beyond the ridges. One evening, as they watched the sunset bleed across the peaks, Samuel said, "Mama, did Papa choose you because he was afraid to die alone?" The question landed gently, but it cut deep. Eliza thought of the man Caleb had been at the end, worn down, honest, brave enough to ask for what he needed. "Yes," she said at last, "and because he hoped something good would come after him." Samuel nodded. Did it? Quote. Eliza looked at her son, at the mountains that had nearly taken her, then given her everything. "Yes," she said softly. It did. The next summer, Samuel left the valley for the first time. The crow came to escort him to a gathering farther east, a place where boys learned what it meant to carry strength without cruelty. Eliza watched him ride away, her chest tight but proud. She did not cry. She had learned that love did not mean holding on too tightly. When Samuel returned weeks later, taller somehow, quieter, Eliza saw the man he was becoming. A bridge between worlds, between his father's legacy and his own future. Years passed. Eliza's hair silvered early. Her hands stayed strong. The cabin held through every season. Inspectors came and went. Papers were signed. The world pressed close, then backed away again. The mountains learned her name. On a clear autumn morning, Eliza climbed the ridge where Caleb was buried. She brought no flowers, only herself. She sat and let the wind speak. "You were right," she said aloud, "about everything." She told him about Samuel, about the land, about how the bargain he offered had become something neither of them could have imagined. Love. Not the kind that arrives gently. The kind that is built, chosen, fought for. When Eliza descended the ridge, Samuel waited below, a man now. Broad-shouldered, steady-eyed. "Ready?" he asked. She smiled. "I've been ready a long time." They walked back toward the cabin together. The fire was lit that night, the door closed against the cold. Outside, the mountains stood watch, as they always had. Caleb Rowan's world lived on, not in gold, not in land, but in the life he asked for, and the woman who chose to give it.